as well.
Thank you, Dr. Moss. Mr. Duffy?
Mr. Greenstone, did you say that you were on the president's economic team? Is that correct?
During the first year of the administration, I was the chief economist at the Council of Economic Advisors.
Okay. And listening to your commentary, you were talking about the social costs of different fuels that we use. You were talking about coal, but there's a social cost to the use of coal and also a social cost to the use of oil, maybe a less apparent cost to maybe wind or solar or natural gas, right?
That's correct.
And therefore the government maybe should step in and increase the cost of coal or gas prematurely, or the government should step in and try to reduce the cost of wind, solar, or natural gas. Is that right? The government should come in and try to make a play on the social cost.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Congressman Duffy. I think the point I was trying to make is when we consume electricity that's generated from firing coal plants right now or various other energy sources, we pay whatever comes across our utility bill, but that's not the only cost we pay. In addition, we pay shortened lives, higher health care bills, changing climate, weakened national security when it comes to petroleum. And just because those don't show up on the bill currently, that doesn't mean we're not paying them.
Okay, and you're a proponent of natural gas, is that right?
No, I'm a proponent of leveling the playing field for all energy sources. And so what does that mean in practice? That means in practice that when we make our energy choices as consumers, the prices should reflect the cost of producing the kilowatt hour of coal, but also all the other costs that consuming that kilowatt hour of coal produces.
So in essence, in your version, we want to see the cost of oil go up to take into account the cost of lives and climate change and global warming, right?
The idea is that we're paying those costs now, but we're not able to make choices that reflect, that recognize those costs.
So I want to be clear, though, you want that to be reflected in the end price of that product, correct?
I think we as a society would be able to make better choices if the end price of that product reflected the full social cost.
So in essence, you believe that the end cost then should be higher, correct?
It depends on the energy source.
Let's use gas, oil, gas for not natural gas, but gas for petroleum. Yes.
Yeah. So yes. So we've been talking as a panel. Some of the EPA regulations are meant to help reflect that price, and my own view is that not all of those social costs are recognized.
They only give me 5 minutes, so I want to be very clear on what you're telling us here. You would like to see gas, petroleum, so gas at the pump, reflect the actual social cost of the use of that energy source, which would mean it would have to go up in price because today, per your testimony, it doesn't accurately reflect the social cost in the price. Yes or no?
Congressman Duffy, yes, and all other energy sources as well.
Right. And so if you do that, if you want to make sure that we increase the cost of our gas at the pump, and in essence, you might then see more use of wind and solar and natural gas, in that calculation, have you taken into account the social cost of the men and women who are sitting in this room today that are steel workers and Boilermakers who will lose their jobs because you, as an advisor to the President, say that as a social policy, I want to see more Americans use a different energy source? And have you considered then the loss of these men's jobs per that policy?
That's an important question. And of course, when one causes changes in the economy, people lose their job, and that's a real cost. And in an adequately defined system, they would be recognized. Let me also make—
You're willing to bear that cost, though, to be clear.
Sorry?
You're willing to bear the cost of these men's jobs for that social policy?
Well, I think it's very important. I think you're raising a really important part of imposing
I only have 30 seconds. You're willing to bear that cost for the social policy?
If I could finish. In addition, I think part of that calculation has to be, and I'm glad that Senator Casey has returned to the room, the tremendous opportunities that appear for people who would produce the alternative.
And again, I guess I don't know how well our Boilermakers are at making windmills or solar panels, or our steel workers. But to be clear, as we've talked about natural gas in your testimony, I think it's clear that natural gas is coming from fracking. And I wonder if you're supportive of fracking, and if you have any issues with the EPA regulating the refining of natural gas, just the same as we've supported the EPA's regulation of refining of petroleum. I mean, there's a whole set of issues that start to spiral out here when we start to take into account the social policy which you referenced, and I think you must have advised the president on these policies, because we see more and more implementation of these policies that have a real impact, not just on the men that I see in this room today, but also a lot of the union members in my district who are losing their jobs because of EPA regulation, even outside of oil. And I know my time is up, and I'm sorry for going over and yield back.
Is there time for me to answer your question?
There's a little bit of time for both, if that's all right.
If I can have, great,
Sure,
thank you.
sure.
Everyone's left here, so thank you. If you give me another minute or a
Sure.
minute and a half, that'd be great.
I believe your question, I'm sorry, I think the question, maybe you could repeat the
Well,
question.
so I was moving on to fracking, and
Yeah.
there's a cost, if you want to say natural gas is clean, and as a social policy you like that over petroleum. Do you also say you support then fracking, which produces natural gas? And then when you look at EPA regulations, are you okay with minimizing those regulations on the refining of natural gas, which is needed, as opposed to the refining regulations that we see for petroleum from the EPA?
Okay, so let me just clearly state, I stopped working in the White House in February 2010. I would be, I think it would be slightly delusional to think that my thoughts stuck around so clearly that the president is still searching the hallways looking for them all the time. But
I think he's embraced them, but go ahead.
But let me just say, my view is whatever the social costs are, be they from environmental damages associated from fracking, be they from greater air pollution, be they from greater CO2 emissions, they should be reflected in the energy prices. And, you know, candidly, until we have a system where those prices are reflected, we'll continue to make choices that cause shortened lives, cause a climate that changes, constrains our energy policy, constrains our foreign policy in ways that are adverse.
And if I just have one more point, my concern is, what bureaucrat makes that decision? What bureaucrat makes that policy, that social decision? Or does the bureaucrat want to give that decision to the Boilermakers? Because I bet that the Boilermakers and the steelworkers have a different social philosophy than a bureaucrat that works in the administration or any other one of these agencies in Washington, D.C.
So,
and there's a differential in social policy and social
view.
view.
A very important question, who makes the decision? And I think it's important to underscore that decision's being made all the time today. And with respect to greenhouse gases, it's largely being made that that has no damages. So it's not that this would be a change in someone making a decision. The decision is made today. It's just made in a very particular way that doesn't reflect the full cost.
But a bureaucrat isn't then making the decision to increase the cost because of their social analysis today. And my time is up. I'm sorry. I'd yield back, Senator Casey.
Thank you for your interest in my testimony.